bit spooky. This evening, there's going to be some politics, albeit just a very small amount, but it's relevant to the topic that we're going to be talking about tonight. And there's some good video involved as well, so it's worth hanging around for that. Now, as you like, you see what I did with the logo on the front of the slide there? It took me ages, that. But let's move on. All of that work just for 30 seconds. So what is UAP anyway? And you're more than welcome to come in on this bit, CJ. But really, it started off as unidentified aerial phenomena. Around the world, everybody used the term UFO. There was some talk within ASSAP about whether we would change the name, etc., and we just sort of sneaked it across into UAP, UFO territory. But as a result of objects being seen or objects being detected under the sea, having aerial phenomena as the acronym was never going to work. So they moved over to unidentified anomalous phenomena. But as you see, the term UFO is still understood around the world. And the photo there was one that I took myself with a sighting last year. All NATO forces have moved over to the term UAP, including the RAF, whose briefings now use the term UAP in the whole, in the whole realm of getting things reported, etc. So all good, all good. But transmedium objects is where we're looking at. So we're not just looking up these days; we're looking down into the sea too. All right. Now, as far as how we are used to having UAP reports coming in, we are used to, mainly as civilians, just people phoning us up or writing to us and saying, right, I've seen this, that, and the other. A lot of the reporting that's going on now and a lot of the stuff that's hitting the news is about military sightings, and the term gets bandied around a lot about being trained observers, but it's true. Much of what we're seeing is as a result of sensor capability. So to give you an idea, we've got spy satellites, we've got aerial sensor capability, so targeting balloons, drones and planes, and then we've got submarines. The world of submarines is incredibly secret for obvious reasons. I mean, you've got major threats around the world at the moment, and we've got undersea cables which are very susceptible to attack by submarine. And then we've got what is colloquially known as the SOSUS sensors. SOSUS is a phrase that's not really used anymore, but colloquially it is. And basically, it's an underwater surveillance system that was spread across the Atlantic and across the Greenland Gap in order to detect Russian submarines back in the 80s and earlier. But as a result of everything that's happening in the world and as a result of stuff that did happen, the SOSUS arrays still exist, just in slightly different forms now. And they are incredibly, incredibly sensitive hydrophones that pick up the movement of material under the water. To pick up on the last two, MASINT and SIGINT. MASINT, if I was to describe how it works, it's materials intelligence. It's if you imagine a spy satellite looking down at the Earth, and so you're looking down, and then a helicopter flies through the field of view, the rotors themselves will have their own signature. The amount of times they rotate within the minute, any particular things that are given off by the rotors get picked up, and that's known as MASINT. SIGINT does come into this. Signals intelligence is basically where, in this realm, if you had a large object in the sky, it would reflect various radio signals back. So, and they use this to some extent to try and track the location of MH370. So they're using the Whisper system. But the problem is we don't have a lot of access to any of this. Most of it is classified. Most of it we may not see for many, many years, if at all. Now, something that happened last year, the Chinese spy balloons in America and up in Canada, it's not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for years. But a really great picture of a Chinese spy balloon here on the right-hand side with its payload underneath, which is designed to pick up signals intelligence, possibly MASINT, and various other things. And it would be spying on America and European countries, wherever it flies over. They started coming into the news last year as a result of NORAD in America changing the way that their radars were picking things up. And they sort of started looking higher and smaller. And all of a sudden, all these balloons arrived, and it caused a furore in the press. And they ended up shooting a few down, including, I suspect, a couple of college weather balloons and other sort of technical experiments, etc. So all good fun. And I'm sure that there's a couple of schools in America that have got themselves brand new playgrounds as a result. One of the balloons was brought down by an F-35 Raptor. I'm not sure if this is a artist's impression, but it's quite a good picture. Indeed. So moving on, something that got spotted back in 2022, now known as the Baghdad Phantom, believed recorded by the forward-looking infrared system of an MQ-9 drone over Baghdad. The stills show a cylindrical object in flight. However, what I've got access to is just a very short clip, and I've turned it into a GIF, which I'm going to play on here. So if I do a bit of that, we'll see it flashing across the screen. What you can see is a cylindrical object flying across from left to right. The reality of this is that there's actually no trail behind it at all. There's no thermal exhaust. There's no obvious thrust systems. There's no flight surfaces or anything. What you're seeing behind the cylinder in this picture is purely an artifact of the video that I've got here. So that found its way out into the public. Great bit of footage. And then this is a still from a video that was taken by another drone over the Iraqi city of Mosul back in 2016. And it sort of goes along the lines of so many other UAPs that have been reported by the military over the years. If we go back to the original reports of Foo Fighters during World War II, many of them are described as lights, but many of them are just simply described as silver orbs as well. Now, there's an argument, of course, that these orbs are a fairly new drone system that's just been around a few years. Well, I'm pretty sure we didn't have that during World War II. But just seeing the light shining off it, absolutely fantastic there. Excuse me, got a bit of a cold at the moment. Moving on. So the reason that all of this has hit the press over the last year or so is due to three people, mostly. Commander David Fravor there in the middle, and Major Dave Grush on the left, Lieutenant Ryan Graves or Lieutenant Ryan Graves on the right. Grush is or was a major in the United States Air Force Reserve and worked in the Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which most of us never even heard of. And he was then tasked with being the liaison to the UAP task force, which was set up by the Department of Defense to investigate UAPs and UFOs and their links to outsourcing to big industry. So he did that very well. Great way with people, excellent investigator. As a result of what he found during his investigations, he became a whistleblower, came forward after finding some very disturbing things during his investigation. And we'll talk about that more in a bit more detail. David Fravor in the middle there, lovely guy, a former commander in the US Navy. He was the commanding officer of the Black Aces Squadron and was posted to the USS Nimitz when he had his encounter with a Tic Tac UFO in 2004. He wasn't the only one to see it. And when he went back to his ship, everybody was just like, okay then, grand, lovely. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, another pilot. He was the pilot of an FA-18F Super Hornet for another US Navy task force, this time off the east coast of America, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, when in a special access area in the sky known as W72, he was buzzed by an orb within a clear cube. much has been spoken of this in recent days, but the main thrust of what Ryan's up to at the moment is about keeping aviators safe. So he's a real advocate for aviation, and he's trying to keep commercial and military pilots safe. All three of these people gave evidence before Congress in July 2023 in what was a landmark um, thing. I mean, it was just huge. This is what really started the ball rolling. Um, so, but numerous other witnesses were supposed to give evidence too, and the problem is that they're reporting that they were leaned on heavily. As many as possibly 40 people were going to give evidence. And so if we look at it, 37 got leaned on and decided not to go. And Tim Burchett, the Republican politician who tried to put all this together, he was mightily upset with this that's gone on, and it's really lit a fire under him. So with the next set of congressional hearings, he's not going to release his witness list. So it's going to be amazing to see who turns up. No dates for that just yet. Okay, so they all gave evidence before Congress under oath, which was huge. Here we go. Dave Grush on the left-hand side made some allegations, absolutely amazing allegations. Let's take a little look. The games that people play. He alleged that in 1933, a UFO crashed in the country of Italy, and it was retrieved initially by the forces of Mussolini. At the end of the war, the Vatican stood in as a mediator and got this craft handed over to the US government, where it was sequestered away for the purposes of back engineering, basically. Grush also said that a few years ago over Vandenberg Air Force Base, a red square a mile wide on each side of the square flew over, stopped over a bunch of technicians, and then flew off again, as you do. He said that numerous craft had been recovered, possibly 12, possibly more. And this is the really interesting part, I think, is that he refers to some of these craft as coming with pilots. And he didn't refer to them as aliens. He referred to them as non-human intelligences, which to some might just sound like splitting hairs, but it's led to a train of thought, and he's coming out with more stuff now, where actually we're not talking about aliens turning up on these craft. We're talking about them being potentially transdimensional, which is just mind-blowing, isn't it? So those are some of the allegations. As a result of trying to keep all of this quiet, he has alleged that some people have hurt and some people may have been hurt to the level where they're no longer around. This was the subject of a briefing to Congress in quiet over the past week or so. And they're really quite concerned about what Grush is saying. And it sounds preposterous, doesn't it? Sounds absolutely crazy. But what I'm going to tell you is this. Grush, when he came forward, went to the Inspector General of the intelligence community in the States. The IG said that he found Grush's allegations credible and with merit, and then referred it to Congress, which is just bonkers. He says that, well, certainly it's believed that other people who have given chats to Congress have committed perjury and threats have been made. Okay. I just love the story about Mussolini and the UFO. I just think it's fantastic. So, as a result of appearing before Congress, Grush started getting smeared massively, as did Kirkpatrick on the right, but we'll come on to him in a minute. News articles began to appear, slamming him and outing him for suffering with PTSD, which in America is seen as a particularly poor show. Going after a decorated veteran with PTSD and trying to make him look bad for that is not very seemly, is it? A police report was suddenly found by a journalist called Ken Klippenstein that shows police involvement with Grush when he was at a low ebb. Interestingly, Ken Klippenstein is the son of Stephen J. Klippenstein, who happens to be a theoretical chemist at the US Department of Energy. And some of the allegations made by Grush are about overreach and illegal activities by people working for the Department of Energy. I'm just saying that's a coincidence. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. So I have no idea. I've no doubt that Klippenstein Senior is not involved in any of that. I'm sure it's all perfectly reasonable, but it just shows what a small world we're operating in. Now, moving on to the right-hand side, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. He was the head of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. He's a very Marmite character. Apparently, he's an absolutely amazing scientist. Amazing scientist, can do amazing things with lasers. But he was the head of Arrow, and contrary to popular opinion, it's not just an organization that was set up to investigate UAPs, but the whole idea of Arrow was to work out any kinks in the system where these sensors are picking up anomalies, and some of them are going to be anomalies that have been reported by operators of radar, operators of surveillance systems, and things like that. Okay. Of note, Kirkpatrick gave evidence before Congress. He's made other statements where he believes that there's no evidence at all for UFOs. He admits that some anomalies exist, but they're trying to get to the bottom of those. To date, the only ones he's actually put out as when he was in charge of Arrow were ones that they say have been resolved. Some of the ones that they haven't resolved remain unreleased. Excuse me. Okay, so he has recently decided to retire and now works at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where he's Chief Technology Officer, dealing specifically with defense and intelligence programs. Emerging science and technology within the world of defense and intelligence. I'm sure he's incredibly well qualified to do that. But, he'd had enough of federal life, and he was attacked massively on the internet after coming out and said, yeah, do you know what? I don't believe in a lot of this, or words to that effect. The UFO community went after him with gusto. I can't condone it, obviously, but I think it's fair to say we got some characters amongst us. So he got fed up with that, and I think his boss, Susan Goff, I think she'd had enough of it as well. So he's being replaced. Okay, moving on. So the media are taking a huge role in this, and specifically certain members of the media. Does anybody get the quote underneath, "You infernal scribblers"? From was it Conan Doyle's The Lost World? So one of the main players on the left-hand side, Ross Coulthart, he's a Australian journalist. He used to present on 60 Minutes in Australia. He's written an excellent book about the UAP situation, and now he does a very good podcast with Bryce Zabel, who wrote the TV show. I think it was called Open Skies, something like that. Micah Hanks, another broadcaster who's very much involved in investigating all of these things, and along with some real big names, George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. Now, I'm going to point at those two specifically because a lot of the footage that's coming out at the moment is coming from Knapp and Corbell. So they've got some very, very good sources. On the other side of the street, we've got Stephen Greenstreet there, who was involved in perhaps debunking some of this stuff or trying to debunk it. I'm not convinced how nicely he's playing with the other children at the moment. I'll put it that way. Klippenstein, well, we've spoken about him already. So let's have a little look. The politicians that are involved, I'll go over this very quickly because I appreciate politics is not everybody's cup of tea. But what's really important about the whole advocacy movement at the moment within Congress for UAP disclosure is that it's bipartisan. If you look at Matt Gaetz there just to the right of center and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just to the left, they are politically poles apart. They couldn't be any further apart politically, but Tim Burchett, who's an absolute dogged investigator into this, if you like, along with leader of the the opposition. No, that's not the opposition now, is it? So Chuck Schumer is majority leader. He tried to get some amendments made to the National Defense Authorization Act in America in order to force technology companies to release what they've got to the US government about retrieved UFOs and non-human intelligence. And there's a reason for that, because the suspicion so far is that after the UFO recoveries were carried out, these craft or engineering or whatever you want to call it were handed over to third parties who are outside of the Freedom of Information Act in America. So if you want information and you go to a company, for instance, like Lockheed Martin, all they will do is tell you to go and speak to the DoD, who will tell you nothing and possibly tell you to speak to Lockheed Martin. The Defense Authorization Act is something that happens every year in America. It's a huge bit of legislation which everybody loves to tinker with, and it basically allows the finances of the military for the next year. Schumer tried to get this amended to, as I say, to force these companies to tell what they knew. And they were only going to have to tell it to Congress, but they don't want to. It would seem. And it was also going to set up an organization very much like the Kennedy Act, where they had to have a organization to release records. They were going to get that done. So all of this has gone by the by in order to get the legislation through, specifically due to the work of two politicians over in the States. You've got Mike Rogers there, chair of the House Armed Services Committee, very active in trying to get the Schumer amendment squashed, apparently. And then gentleman on the right, Mike Turner, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, in his backyard is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, Wright-Pat is where the allegation is that the Roswell wreckage was taken to. Just throwing that out there. Okay, moving on. I'm going to very briefly flip over this. As we can see, Rogers and Turner, they get fairly sizable incomes from the defense and defense aerospace industry, which is nice if you can get it. Other organizations involved in this. So we've got AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, part of the US government. The UAP task force, which is what Grush worked for. US Space Force, don't really come into this, but it looks nice. National Aeronautics Space Administration, NASA, who are now running their own investigation into UAPs using non-classified material. So good luck with that. And then you've got ASSAP and ATIP, which are now historical, but if you've heard of Lou Elizondo, that's the area he came out of. Good. Right, moving on to recent video releases. Knapp and Corbell released a couple of weeks ago something known as the Jellyfish UAP. It's a bit noisy, so you might have to turn your speakers down ever so slightly. But I'm just going to ask you to have a view of it, see what you think. It was filmed from a US Army aerostat, and that's basically a hot air balloon hanging over a base in Iraq. See what you think of this. And there you go. All right. There's more information about that, which I'll tell you about very shortly. But what I'd like you to do now is to look at a video. Here we go. This was filmed near the Turkish town of Riga, and I think I'm saying it right. It's not far. It's on the north coast of Turkey. It's not far from the border with Georgia. So, but it's a Turkish place. Okay. Really interesting. It was filmed possibly in about 2000. We don't know the source. We don't know the exact date, but we can sort of geolocate it from other pictures that we've seen. So if you want to have a look at this, unfortunately, this is about 4 minutes long and it's quite excitable and in Turkish. So, but bear with me. I'm just really interested to know in the comments what you think about it, and we can chat about it afterwards. Okay, we go.
Alamadı değil mi enişte?
Ya, o kadar yaklaştırmıyor, çekiyorum da.
Evet. Hay anasını be. Sabahtan ben de ışıkları söndürdüm. Ben bütünce de bakayım ona ama göremedim. Bu sabahtan ya ışıkları yandırıyor söndürüyor aynı elektrikçi bu.
Gel buraya gel.
Tüm.
Serap. Gelsene buraya. Gel.
Bear with it, and there's more.
Aydın ışığı gördün.
Ya adam var orada ya anasını ya kurulu dövdü. Burada yatılı bir şey var. Gece çok baktım ama.
Sen de gündüz. Aa bak gelmişsin. Aa bak gördün mü?
Enişteyi al.
Aynen.
Yandı nedir ya?
Yanıyor. Vallahi yanıyor. Şuradan söndür. Aa şimdi söndür. Aa bak vallahi. Aa şimdi söndür.
Ayı olabilir mi?
Ne? Ayı istiyor.
Aa güneşle ne işi var ya sen? Güneş.
Güneşin bir tarafa da vuruyor. Baksana. Aa bak görüyor musun? Orada
Abi orada büyük iş. Böyle ufak değil ha. Orada burada yani bize görünüyor. Hani Mustafa. Değer. Çok fena yanıyor ya.
Evet, şimdi hareketlenecek. Kalkışını izleyeceğiz. Çok enteresan
O
bir.
daha iyi göster.
Evet, burada.
Oo kalkıcı ya. Aydın çek.
Bak açılıyor. Haydi. Aa gidecek.
Var milleti kaldırıp
Bak gördünüz mü? Bak bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hadi.
Çok parlak gözükmesinin sebebi de güneşi o anda almaya başlıyor. Evet. Yani kameranın algılamasından çok daha kuvvetli değil.
Bakın çek Aydın.
Ha havalanda gidiyor. Bakın gördünüz mü İshak?
Ya en güzelini Aydın çekiyor işte. Aydın en güzel.
Sen gördün mü bak. Ay lan görmeyeyim mi salonların başında ya.
Bu ışık saçmaya havada bile devam ediyor. Evet. Ne kadar enteresan.
Lan gördün mü? Salak lan bu salak mıydı ya? Lan desene.
Özellikle bizim için bu sesler çok önemli biliyorsun. Yani bunun işte doğallığı.
Aydın çekebilir misin Aydın?
He?
Çekebilir misin?
Evet.
Çekiyor çok net. Çekiliyor.
Çekilen video kameranın teknik olarak çok yeterli olmaması belli bir yerde duruyor. Tabii. Zoom'u ve belli bir yerden sonra da
Ben seni
kırılaşıyor
gösterdim.
görüntüler.
Ben seni çağır da bir şey.
Lan İnanmadı. Çek Aydın yavrum çek.
Enderbiye de verin. Azıcık baksın.
Bakın görün kimse inanmıyor.
Hayır ne var?
Tabiatı da yok.
Oradan daha güzel gözüküyor.
Sabah bak gidiyor uçtu.
Gördün mü?
Aşağı yukarı yukarı kaç kişi vardı orada çekim
Bir
yapılırken?
15-20
Herhalde
kişinin
en az 10
üzerinde
kişi değil mi?
şahit var. Tabii, en az 15-20 kişi. Şimdi bu VTR'den sonra detaylarını konuşacağız. Bir gece evvelden gözlemlenmeye başlanıyor ve 5-6 tane 6-7 kişi varlık, kısa boylu bir takım varlıklar gözlemliyorlar.
Ormanlık alanı.
Tabii o bölgede.
Tamiratı yaptılar gittiler ya işte tamam gitti.
Ben bir kere çok uğraştım.
Kaç dedim ama birden bir ışık gördüm. Ulan dedim bir yavru geliyor.
Koyup
Tabii görüntü aşağı yukarı 14 dakikalık bir görüntü ama biz kısalttık tabii. Birkaç az sonra bitecek VTR.
Aydın onu iyi çek.
Boşluktaydı.
Büyük ağaçlar var ya. Oradaydı. Bu ağacın orada.
Bakın yine
Gördün mü?
ışık saçtığını bu kadar uzun mesafeden yine zoomlandığında görebiliyoruz.
Okay. Now, it's really difficult because we have virtually no context for the second video at all. What I can tell you is that we had a Turkish speaker listen to the footage. If you look at the uncropped version, which is on YouTube, you've got two TV presenters basically discussing it very quietly what they're hearing on the video. But it's obvious that they were very excited. Basically the text is along the lines of, I hope it's not coming towards us, etc., etc. There's very little in the way of context, so this could be absolutely anything, although I suspect I know what it isn't. So what do we know? Video one, filmed from an aerostat over the US base in Iraq in October 2018, possibly 2017, still to be totally confirmed. A witness has come forward and spoken to media over this, a guy called Michael Chinkowski, who was a Marine at the base at the time that it was filmed, and part of his job was actually looking after the terminal where the footage was stored. So he's confirmed that the footage in the first one is authentic. There's a couple of things he can't confirm, but other witnesses have come forward to say that in the first one, there is approximately 20 or so minutes of footage, and what they say is this: the first image, the whatever it is, the object goes over to a lake, then goes into the lake, submerges, and stays there for 17 minutes. The camera stays on it. It then leaves the lake and then shoots off at speed at 45 degrees into the sky, where it's lost. Okay. We haven't seen that. Will we ever see it? Who knows? Now, on the base, it was known as the Spaghetti Monster, and it was a bit of an open secret. It was known as the base ghost as well. The picture at the bottom right-hand side is the town of Regia on the coast, and as we can see, the terrain looks very similar, so we suspect that might be okay. All right, moving on. So what does it remind you of? A lot of people think balloons. Fair enough. I've managed to get the images from both on the right-hand side there. Another UAP that was filmed a few years ago off Turkey is the one in the middle, which is not too dissimilar. And that was believed to be a collapsed weather balloon. So, yeah, maybe it is. My little joke on the left-hand side, Maximilian from the Black Hole, just kind of reminded me of that in the first one. But again, in the comments, really will be interested to find out what you think of it and any questions that you might have. If I can answer them, I will. Moving on to something else, and something that it reminded me of. I went to a conference up in Hull. It's the Outer Limits Conference, and a guy called Mike Covell, who is a Hull-based investigator, played us this. It's only a clip from a much longer YouTube video. The idea of the YouTube video is that they go around fairgrounds and just film everything, basically. But this was in it, and I think it's really interesting. So see what you think. Absolutely bizarre. If you caught it on the bottom right hand side of it, there appears to be some sort of claw looking thing or a manipulator arm, but I did slow it down so we can have a look at that. Let's have a little look and see what you think. Okay. All right. I don't know what it is. I don't pretend to know what it is, but it sends a shiver down my spine whenever I watch it. It's quite bizarre. So moving on to other analysis of the same bit of footage. There's a gentleman, investigator by the name of Steve Meara. I don't know him, but he seems good at what he does. I disagree with him on some of his assertions with this, but we'll take a look at it. This is a snip from one of Steve's videos on the left-hand side. Now, there was a suggestion by an investigator by the name of Mick West that the object in the first video is a group of Eid balloons flying across the base. All right, fair enough. I personally, I feel that it doesn't fly like balloons, but that's fine. I'm no expert at that. And then he produced this picture of a bunch of Eid balloons. Now, interestingly, I can't find this picture anywhere else on the internet, so it may be that it's a collage that's been put together. I just don't know. But yeah, without a doubt, it looks very similar. However, if it's something that you're creating to look similar, then it will, won't it? Now, it was also stated in Steve's video that Michael Chinkowski basically denied that it was a UFO. He's actually come out and gone to other media now. He's come out and gone to the Weaponized podcast, which is Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, basically said he was badly quoted by one of the papers in an interview, and that actually he's pretty open-minded about this, but he definitely thinks it's incredibly weird. So who knows? But again, you know, somebody getting misquoted and reasonably shoddily treated. All of the stuff is available online to watch and to listen to. The Weaponized podcast is really good. Steve Meara's videos there to watch as well. We can look at it. Steve believes it's balloons. He said it reminds him of balloons, and therefore it is. I disagree. I mean, we don't know. Fine. Okay. Moving on. So points of discussion. As I say, Steve said it reminds him of balloons. It must be balloons. I find it really interesting that this object, as it's flying across the base, firstly, it moves across a dog. I mean, it could be really high up, but dogs are pretty good at noticing things. The two service personnel there, they appear not to notice it as well. So it could be about parallax, or, you know, the angle that we're looking at this object from. The balloon it's filmed from is a long way up. Now, interestingly, it shows up on thermal, but it doesn't show up on night vision at all. So maybe that's the reason that there's no sort of behavioral change from the people on the ground, is because it just couldn't be seen, but it definitely sticks out on thermal. There we go. Just make sure I've got everything else there. Yeah, I've told you all of that stuff. And then we move on to Sean Kirkpatrick. He was the head of Arrow. He kept his mouth pretty much firmly shut while he was in charge of Arrow. Since then, he's come out, he's done some media. He did this podcast with Peter Bergen over in the States, came out about 4 days ago, where he states that there is basically a conspiracy in the US Congress in order to make this about aliens and UFOs. This is the same Dr. Kirkpatrick that left federal service and has now gone to work for Oak Ridge National Laboratories, dealing with emerging science within the defense field. You know, make of that what you will. But as I say, he's meant to be a really, really good scientist. So, firstly, I'm glad he's on our side. But I don't know. I just he's come out in the past and said that they've had no credible witnesses come forward. Well, we know for a fact that's not true. We know that's not true. Okay, there we are. But again, all of this stuff is out there for you to listen to and to watch. It's really good. Go do your own research on it. You don't need to listen to me and me to tell you what to think, nor Steve or anybody else, really. Your own critical thinking is going to be ideal. Which is where we come in, really, as ASSAP. We don't seek to make any profit or monetize our work here. What's in it for us? It's really just getting to the truth, isn't it? We're scientific. We use critical thinking. We've got our own investigators in house, and we're really keen to find the truth rather than to prove or debunk different theories. We just want to find out what's going on. I have my own personal thoughts on it, of course I do, but I manage to keep most of those in a box while I'm doing my stuff. And that's about it, really. Some contact details for ASSAP on the screen there. My Twitter account at the bottom, @PaulGledhill. Please do feel free to, follow me on Twitter. I'll follow you back. And all good. If you're not a member of ASSAP, please do join. It's a $5 a year for the online version, and it's an absolute bargain for what you get. And with that, CJ, it's back to you. Hello, CJ. Hello, Claire. I think I put them to sleep.
CJ or Claire, where are you? Come on.
Hello, I'm here. Hi.
There she is. I was about to step in there. You know that, don't you?
Well done, Stu.
Well, this is nice.
Isn't it? I just blew him away. Blew him away completely. All right. Well, okay. Well, Christian, you there?
I am here. Yes, I'm.
Buddy, have you got access to the chat, Christian? I don't know whether I'm
I've got
taking.
it.
I don't want to take Claire's glory away, but maybe somebody could go through the comments and questions and stuff.
I think the CJ might have been abducted as part of the main comment right now.
You can only hope, can't you?
Back through this. So yes, I'm currently on my mobile today.
No, that's fine. Yeah, CJ or Stu can do it or something, or Christian.
No, it's all right.
Okay.
It's all right. Let's go through this.
The men in black have come for CJ.
Steve,
Well, if I get him back in a minute, I won't worry too much.
Oh, blimey.
Oh dear, dude. What you been eating, man?
No, it's a cold. No.
Right, Christian, do you want to do the questions or shall I? I'm quite happy.
Would you do it actually? Only reason is it's actually taking time to load as I scroll.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind.
No problem. I'll just go through the 150 hellos, good evenings, how you all doing? Hello, darling. Oh, no, that's another one.
who's this bloke? Get him off the screen, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, okay. Dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun, dun. Here we go. So, first one from about the 1933 Italian case, Neil Nixon pointed out. The 1933 Italian case, very dodgy, IMHO and mine, I must say. Evidence mainly dates from 1996, and the one key driver of said evidence is Bill Brophy Jr. Billy Brophy, isn't it? Yeah. Go on, Neil. You got it.
Yeah. Well, so I'll be honest, Paul. I watched some of those hearings, and the second that David Grush started talking about that case, my heart just sank.
That's fair enough.
What? Sorry.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, but the gist of it, if tell me where I get. I used to have a deal with my students. If my idea's shit, come back with a better one. So, tell me where I get this wrong. That the whole Italian case, the whole 1933 Italian case, dates from the mid-1990s when some documents were sent anonymously to ufologists in Italy. And the first red flag on this one was that the whole unveiling of the documents and the way that it was kind of covertly apparently leaked smacked of the way that the MJ12 documents emerged.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So virtually none of these ufologists took it seriously. There was one or two who did, and there were just random little bits of publication. And effectively at that stage, the story was not hugely complicated. It wasn't the lurid tale that David Grush told. And one of the key drivers of the evidence, as Stu mentioned, was William Brophy Jr., which again is a massive bloody red flag. You know, this is a guy who's got form of jumping on every UFO case, and he's the Brian Dunning used the word delusional to describe him. And he tends to tell stories about cracking UFO cases, which always implicate William Brophy Sr., his dad, who's conveniently dead, but was a significant player in the Air Force. So William Brophy Jr. has inside track on all these stories because his dad told them. But again, another red flag on this one is that William Brophy Jr.'s ability to leap on a story and embellish it always post-dates the story first appearing. I mean, he'd be a hell of a lot more credible if he came forward and said something that nobody's released first. So I've got to be honest, I was massively bloody skeptical about that. And, you know, a few other people have come on board with it. And sorry, but the only reason I still give a shit about ufology is that unlike a lot of other people who I've crossed paths with for decades, I'm probably more of a believer in certain ways than any of them are. But I have a real
really
problem with that.
Neil.
Sorry?
Let me come back to you on it and see what you think of this. Now, the Brophy side of things, I'm going to take that as read from what you're saying, okay? Because I'm not up to date on that at all.
But that's most of the story.
Yeah, no, fine.
Yeah.
But the point is this, that the thrust of the talk tonight is about what the current scuttlebutt is. And the thing with what you're saying there is actually, if we think about Grush, if what Grush is saying is true, his sources are the ones who are working on this equipment. Yeah, so it may well be that Brophy's telling a load of old rubbish. Yeah, but if what the point is, it's about where Grush sources are. Yeah, and the thing is that the Inspector General of the intelligence community has said, actually, a lot of this stuff has got some merit to it. So we don't have an answer. And whilst we're bringing up the stuff from 96, etc., yeah, that could be a completely anomalous thing that's just on the side and has sought to muddy the waters and everything else. What we need to get to is what Grush knows. What we need to get to is what Grush's sources knows, because the thing is they are intrinsically in the program rather than just some next guy. So
totally agree with you. And at which point, because I don't, there's loads of other people want to talk.
Sure, yeah.
So my suspicion, and I don't know, and neither do you, and I would imagine that one thing that will drive us forward is what you said at the end, that it's about finding the truth.
Yes.
One of my worries about somebody like David Grush is that if his sources are feeding him that, and if he falls for the 1933 case, then the question is, what's the point of the sources feeding him the information when he personally didn't see anything firsthand? And at that point, it just worries me that the American security, they have form on this. I mean, you know, the whole Paul Benowitz case and the Richard Doty, who was the agent who fed Paul Benowitz a lot of.
We know all about him, but they're
exactly.
they're not to do with sorry, I'm not trying to talk over you, Neil. They're not to do with tonight's talk.
No, I know.
The whole purpose of this is just to relay what's being said before Congress. The fact is, it's a historical moment in ufology, whether it turns out to be true or not. But the problem is that Grush himself, as a witness, he's not claiming to have seen it. And I totally take on board what you're saying about that. But what he's saying is he's claiming to speak to people who are inside the program, who have and are working on it.
I get the point of the talk, but my worry is that, I suppose, I may be wrong, but I think we may be seeing the same pattern that with the whole business with Paul Benowitz. He was fed a little bit of the right information, a lot of the wrong information, which in the end discredited him and didn't do him any favors. And it might be the same thing with David Grush. And in the case of Paul Benowitz, there is no suggestion that he was seeing anything genuinely extraterrestrial. In the case of Paul Benowitz, he'd stumbled on technological developments that the American military wanted to keep secret, and they led him down that rabbit hole, which damaged his mental health, but also took a lot of people with him in terms of what they
No,
believe.
I totally take that on board, and I completely accept it. I just don't think that's necessarily got anything to do with tonight's talk. So, with the greatest respect. So,
Well, the thing it might have to do with it is that we might be seeing the same pattern repeating itself. It doesn't look like it is. That's a possibility. I think we have
it's
to
a
be
possibility.
open.
Yeah,
I think we have to
absolutely.
be open to that possibility. But that's the relevance that.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes patterns repeat themselves. It's just that the surface evidence looks very different, but the underlying pattern is very similar.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Nice one. Thanks, Neil. Christian.
No, so I'll do it. So we're moving
Sure,
on now.
yeah.
We're onto the drone footage or the footage, shall we say? So Jackie Tonks said, I think the jellyfish is a drone disguised as balloons because the movement seems much too controlled for just balloons.
Yeah,
They're not
quite
buffeted,
possibly.
it's
Yeah.
moving, which is a fair
The
point.
witnesses to this are saying that the thing that was seen over the military base was like crystalline in its makeup, and of course it's very difficult to say, and and to be absolutely fair to the witnesses, we're probably never going to speak to them. We're probably never going to find out exactly what they know. It's just out there for people to think, and I think Jackie's point's well made. The purpose of the cameras over the base there is to deal with incursions. The systems that they've got on there can pick out a hot tire on a truck something like 30 miles away. So they're pretty good. If it is a drone going over disguised as balloons, absolutely fine. Don't understand why. The other point I was going to make about that, which I didn't make in the actual talk, so apologies, is Steve was saying, oh, it's these Eid balloons that, because of the time of year that the sighting was at, so it's balloons specifically for Eid. If that's the case with the Turkish jellyfish, if that's the case, bearing in mind that 99% of the population of Turkey, and that I checked that earlier on, is Muslim. You'd like to think that somebody would have recognized it, but who knows? Who knows?
But then again, if you look at that, I saw one myself not too long ago, and it was basically a big helium number 2, folks, as in the digit, not as in anyway. It was, but yeah, a pair of binoculars, you could see that's what it was. But
It was a
because of where it was,
2
it was
UFO.
glinting.
Yeah,
It was a globe. It was a glinting globe. So
Yeah.
it does distort, doesn't it? And
It
coming back
does,
to what
absolutely.
Jackie said, the crystalline is an interesting description. If
Yeah.
you're looking at something where there's an awful, very, very strong sun, which there is in that part of the world, obviously.
It could be
glinting
mylar,
or
couldn't
something.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, it could be all kinds of things. I mean, Julian's Boyd added, did the 2 people on the ground notice it? This is back to the Iraqi one, I think. Did the 2 people on the ground actually notice it? Did they see it? Do we know?
Well, that's it. No, I think I said earlier on. I mean, there's no indicator from the behavior of the 2 on the floor that they noticed it, because one would think that they'd stop and carry on looking.
Yeah.
And it may be, as I was saying earlier on, it could be that actually this object is so far off the floor it just wouldn't have been seen.
Yeah.
The fact that it wasn't picked up on night vision but thermal, maybe it isn't visible to the naked eye. Who knows?
Yeah, well, people don't look up either, do they?
Which is, they do. Well, that's a fact, especially if you're walking around having a cigarette, just chatting about anything.
Yeah.
You're not switched on 24 hours a day, are you?
No. I mean, I then made the point that it looks very, very like the Imperial probe droid for the Empire Strikes Back
it
at the
really
beginning.
is.
It's very similar. It's got that sort of shape. It's got kind of
Yeah.
like the little feet, and it moves in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And that just that kind of and Liz Barkley very kindly agreed with me. Took the words out of her mouth on that one. Tony Bushy said it appears near the lens, presumably because the relative way it's moving to the lens. Perhaps it's an insect. Perhaps it's something actually caught.
Well, somebody did say that in one of the articles that I read online, is that they felt that it was like a smudge on the lens or something like that. Maybe that doesn't account for witness testimony saying that it then went into the water and stayed there and then shot off at speed. But who knows? Who knows? Because the thing is that just because it's witness people, these witnesses are telling that to Corbell and Knapp. They're not telling it to me, so I've got to be quite stood back from it.
Yeah, it's all you can be, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know, no other way you can be. Darren Hudson said it looks like one of the hover suits the US military have been using for a while now.
Yeah,
which
I
we have
thought
seen.
that.
Yeah, and the two pedestrians look like they saw it. Well, I suppose if it's a hover suit
Okay,
and they're
that's interesting.
military, they've seen it, they know what it is.
Yeah,
suit,
really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Claire said it was a wild-eyed, one-horned flying people. So, well, it could well be. You know.
Can I make a point?
I think they're still classified. Neil, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, go on, Neil.
Yeah, just a simple thing about. So I've seen some of these more amorphous shapes more recently on YouTube, and they're appearing more and more readily. Now, some of the video you showed us is older, but some of the more recent stuff.
Yeah.
There's one thing I would say about them is that they get a lot of hits and they get a lot of comments underneath them about the fact that people either know what they are or more often are just amazingly convinced of them. And great. The skeptical bit of me again thinks that the whole history of images of UFOs and things like that became popular always goes along with the cutting edge technology of what's possible. So if you look back 70 years, you look at trick photography, I mean, you know, which might just be simple everyday objects repurposed and redesigned. If you look at something infamous and hugely discredited like Gulf Breeze, you're looking at the pictures that were, it's great trick photography, but it's cutting edge to the point where he filled a lot of people, and MUFON had a 3-line whip on. You know, you were excommunicated if you didn't believe it. And with some of the more recent videos now, I'm not the biggest expert on this, but it's not beyond the bounds of the kind of trickery that you could dream up on your own computer if you knew what you were doing. And, you know, the kind of artificial intelligence that you can attach to something that will make it move. I think what's interesting is that if they're a natural phenomena, it's bizarre that nobody was filming them until recently, as in basically 21st century or thereabouts. If they're not a natural phenomena, it's more in line with some of these things being easier to fake in 2024 than they would have been before. And it's interesting because these days you tend not to see the kind of pictures that you saw 70 years ago or the Gulf Breeze things, because, you know, they're and in the digital age, weirdly, fakes are harder to detect because you've just got your, you know, well, creating a fake, if you don't have negatives, you've done away with one way of detecting a fake, basically. So there's never been more video and there's never been more uncertainty.
Absolutely, and to your point as well, Neil, it has to be said. I mean, that footage of the first one was filmed off a screen. It's not the original footage. I should have mentioned that, because I had to crop it to get it to even remotely rectangular. So yeah, it's so difficult to tell. All we can go by is where they're saying it came from. If it turns out that it's an almighty hoax, then the reputation of people like George Knapp, Coulthard, and everybody else will be absolutely destroyed. So
but major reputations getting trashed is nothing new in ufology, is it?
No, but I'm just showing empathy for the journalists involved. I just sincerely hope that they don't go that way. I just, you know, I hope it's realistic. Maybe we'll never get to the bottom of it. I take your point entirely. I just hope for their sake that their sources are genuine. You know? Yeah.
Well, wishful thinking can overtake, can't it? If you remember when they
absolutely.
When they so-called found a Bigfoot body by Tom Biscardi, the famous hoaxer, and Lauren Coleman on his own site went as far as to say, "This here, we've got it, we found one." You know, until it basically became clear that it was a rubber Halloween costume that had been stuck in a freezer. At which point, Lauren, to his discredit, really just deleted everything off his blog, every mention he'd ever made of it. Wow. And then following week, he goes, "Oh, look at that bloody Biscardi again! What a bugger!" You know what I mean? It can get the best of them. You know, even wishful thinking can overtake, can't it? You know,
it really can.
It's only got to take the right people so far, and everybody will go. You know, everybody will follow it.
I mean, there's the more recent stuff about the Loch Ness monster is more about the history of what people believe. But Peter Scott was convinced 50 years ago, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It was
Esoterus Rhombopteryx.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Monster hoaxed by Sir Peter S. An anagram of, which is great.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
No, I mean, unintentional, but
yeah, I'm with you on. I know I never remind Phil Mantle on the odd occasion that I swap messages with him about, you know, the Dear UFO Disbeliever thing, where he was absolutely convinced briefly about the alien autopsy film in the 1990s, wasn't he? But I mean, to his credit, he's taken that one on the chin, and he actually, the last time I actually physically saw him was at a conference where they'd got Stelios Maliarkis,
Spiros Malaris, yeah.
Malaris, that's it, yeah. Phil had actually booked Stelios to speak at the conference, and Stelios got up and spoke about hoaxing the damn thing. You know?
Well, Phil's gone further than anybody to cover the hoax. You know, you know, when I did the thing for the FT about it, it was Phil that I took as the main thing, and talking to Spiros and stuff like that. But Phil, yeah, you're right, took it on the chin. Fair enough, you got me.
Just on that point as well, Stu and Neil. If you're interested in that, in the story of that famous hoax from back in the 90s, Astonishing Legends did a two-parter, I think it was, with Spiros, which I organised, and it really goes into a lot of detail on it, so it's cracking.
Oh yeah, totally. Spiros completely stands up. He's completely consistent in what he says, you know. And Santilli wouldn't speak to me, so it says everything.
No, I tried to get an interview with Santilli. I bumped into his girlfriend and tried to get her to organise something, but he wasn't having it at all. So
no, he won't. Well, anything he says, he's going to prove himself wrong, isn't he? So you can't misquote silence. That's the point. Anyway, back into this. So jellyfish UFOs sound more like aerial animals of Trevor James Constable than technological artifacts. Yeah, because Alvin Sanderson said the same thing, couldn't he? They could be tulpas up in the air, sort of thing. Yeah.
Why not? Yeah.
What was the footage? I presume this is still the Iraqi one, I guess. The footage captured as natural light, or is it IR? Is it
at night? It was at night, apparently, and it was infrared. Thermal, sorry. So yeah, didn't show up on night vision.
Right. Okay. Ashley McCudden says they jellyfish looked like it was shaped for easy movement, but completely rigid. Yeah, it does. It does flow remarkably smoothly, doesn't it?
It really does. And there was some talk about if it's a balloon, then I mean, obviously we've got no idea of size in this whatsoever. But wind as it blows, it's not a uniform thing pushing it along, is it? It's there's if it was balloons, I personally would expect some wavering either at the top or the bottom or whatever, but it just seems to be fixed as it goes on. It's very bizarre, very bizarre.
Well, again, the one that I sighted earlier on that I saw helium balloon, it must have been 2 or 3 miles away, but it's catching out, and it appeared stationary. As soon as you saw it through binoculars, you could see it was, you know, it was really wavering an awful lot. But from a distance, it doesn't look like it. So yeah, it depends totally how close you are to the lens. You can't tell, can you? Whatever they are. So both the things and the Turkish one, they look very much like the same things. What Michelle Pierce says, striking similarities. Ashling again looks like foam. And then Neil said this, and there are moments when the lower pieces hanging off the bottom separate from the main object. So it's either cutting edge physics, poor quality camera, or evidence the object was edited in afterwards.
I mean, there's definitely. I mean, Neil's right. In the second one, there's definitely an edit in there because it jumps back out and then goes back in. And you can see the cut. And I'm tempted to say that I think it's just the quality of the footage that where a thinner part just doesn't render properly on the screen. But who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Look, balloons. Lots of people saying balloons.
Yeah, fair enough.
Ashling again, Mothman. It could be Ashling. It might be right. You never know. Or just a moth. Yeah, it depends how far away it is.
Moth, yeah.
It's small and far away, isn't it? This is what this is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. but the whole thing is so interesting, and it's conjured up this chat tonight. You know, people with different ideas and things like that, and that's what we want, isn't it? It's just you know, it could be this, it could be that, because the thing is, you know, none, as like Neil said earlier on, none of us actually know. So you know, it's great.
No, but it's the thing about fortunism. Until you know, you can ascribe a degree of likelihood to things, but you can never say for definite this isn't it. Or it could be 100 different things that we just perceive in one way. You know, this is the thing, isn't it? You know.
Yeah.
But we'll get back onto that one another day, I'm sure. Neil again. Neil, you're very chatty today, weren't you, Neil? Looking for a deal for the sequel. We could get Richard Gere and Laura Linney to resign. Good point. Yeah.
That was in response to somebody who thought it was Mothman.
Yeah, Mothman. Yeah. Don't want to come over as totally skeptical, Neil again. But there's some credible military witnesses. Then there's the likes of Larry Warren, who wrote Left at Eastgate, which I did. It's a ripping yarn.
Can I just pick up on that, Stu? just
Say
pick
what?
up on that. Just pick
Yeah,
up
go
on
for
that. What we're talking about is, and I'm saying this as an ex-military person. Larry Warren was a junior rank. Yeah. Major David Grush, who had briefed presidents, with some of the highest security clearances he could have, says that he believes this to be true. I think there's a big difference as far as like Larry Warren and Dave Grush.
But then
And
Colonel
I've
Holt
got total
himself,
respect
you
for
got
Larry.
Charles Holt there, and he was a colonel.
Yeah, he
so
was. He was deputy base commander, wasn't he? And he was out the loop. So
yeah. It's Rendlesham's just become a mess now, hasn't it? It's got its own momentum. But again, it's like Roswell. Whatever you say, there will be people who will always believe it.
When it comes
it's just
to
gone off in its own
Rendlesham,
way.
and I completely agree. When it comes to Rendlesham, I just go back to the recording and then just try to work it out from there. I think, and to be fair, I don't think I would ever actually try to investigate Rendlesham. It's like you say, it's just too muddy.
It's a mire. It's probably a combination of Lighthouse and God knows what else. Obviously, my favourite thing is a bit like Berwyn. It could well have been an accidentally dropped nuke, and it was in the forest somewhere. And they had to bloody retrieve it.
Yeah, Berwyn, Broken Arrow type.
Yeah,
situation.
It was a nuclear base, wasn't it? And things do fall off B-52s occasionally when they're coming into land.
Can I make a point about Rendlesham?
Yeah, sure.
If we want to go back to the basics of Rendlesham, this is one of the reasons why, from the beginning, the Larry Warren book is not credible. I mean, I don't want to get into that, but people forget now that the first events around Rendlesham are nothing that's recorded by Colonel Holt. The first thing that happened that alerted anybody to something bizarre in Rendlesham Forest was the residents at Capel Green, which is across the field from the alleged landing site, called the police because of lights in the forest. That's what first happened. And that tends to get, the only book that records that in any detail is Sky Crash, which is the first book. And then from that point on, the story takes a momentum of its own, which is driven largely by the military witnesses. But interestingly, some of the things that the military witnesses are describing are not completely consistent with the original call out. I mean, originally what happened was that it was all on one night, not on two. And in the early hours of, I think it was Boxing Day, there was a farmer called, was it Ted Boast or something? And a few others. They called the police because of lights in the forest, which they suspected was to do with poaching. Yeah. And so it may be that there's a very, very simple explanation for all of that that's hidden under a welter of claims by the military. I mean, I've got my own suspicions on it, but the problem is that there's, other than it being a credible story that you can stand up, there's no evidence for what I would suspect. But so that gets lost in all the discussion about Rendlesham. They never mentioned that in the various documentaries. Now the civilian witnesses who were the first are never, nobody ever goes back to find them.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, cracking on from away at the time. Julie Boyd says it looks like a witch flying over a broomstick, a pointed hat, all in black. I think we're talking about the Turkish one. Then the one that's over the fairground.
Julie. You've hit it on the head.
Yeah, it does.
That's the one.
Definitely. And then we get on to here we go. Now we're getting on to the thank yous. So, yeah, brilliant talk. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. I will come back to what Claire said in a minute. Thank you. Dave Stevenson, aerogel has some interesting properties. I wonder if it behaves in an unexpected, unconventional manner, i.e. stiff form, invisible against a bright sky, but viewable in IR or thermal. I don't know what aerofoam is. David, are you there? David?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Very well. How are you all?
Very well, thank you. So, Joe, do you want to go into aerogel? What's aerogel?
Well, I don't know much about it. I've heard of it being used in military applications before, and it's a kind of relatively new material. But basically, it is a very lightweight type of foam, or sort of a matrix of foam. But it consists of like 99% air, or just 99% gas. It's a very, very fine kind of crystalline structure, and it's kind of used for insulation. I'm just wondering, those sort of properties to me suggest it could be, it could like float very easily in a kind of very light breeze. It could be very, very difficult to see against a light backdrop, and it could have some sort of thermal signature in an IR camera. So that's
good shout, Dave. I think I'm just looking at Excuse me, I'm just looking at aerogel on Wikipedia now, which, as we all know, is infallible. Yeah, never heard of that one, so that's something for me to research. So that's all good. It looks a bit like nougat, which has really piqued my interest.
The pink stuff or the white stuff, that's the difference.
Right,
Bit of both.
Did I just cut out just then? I didn't hear any of the last bit of that.
Go on, Gledders. He thinks it's nougat, basically.
Basically, I reference nougat, Dave. That's fine, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Funny enough, my daughter's just eating some right next to me right now. So that's
there you go, synchronicity, you see.
There you go, mate. Here's Lexi links, that is. Right, okay, so where are we? So, yeah, lots of thanks. Very informative. Thank you very much. Has CJ been abducted? We all think CJ's been abducted, don't we? Many thanks, great thanks. Robert Stent, you have to be open. All information is open subject. The corrupt system will cover up and generate what they want you to know. Well, yeah, that's
true, but it's the system we've got, and we can't change that necessarily. So we just got to deal with the information that's there. Hopefully, what I'm going to say is that they're talking now because of the Schumer amendment being crushed as it was, and basically turned into nothing. The disclosure argument now is gone from like this controlled disclosure by politicians to this catastrophic disclosure potentially. Pushed by journalists. So, I mean, I'm all for national security. I used to work in that field. I understand why it exists. But there are things we should know as people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but the thing is, as we've always said, and in fact, I said in my last one that I did for this, we've been told there's going to be next year is going to be the alien revelation, haven't we, since 1947? So it's like every year they're going to reveal it this year. We're being softened up. Yeah, so we're on the 75th year of that at least. So, I won't hold my breath. It'd be great if they do, but I don't know. Anyway, Simon Brown, we need to see the rest of the jellyfish video where they claim they went underwater.
Yeah, we really do. The Chinkovsky, who is the person who's come forward so far, as I say, he was involved in looking after the terminal where the actual footage was stored. He personally didn't see it go into the water, but other witnesses are saying that they did. So who knows? We might find out, we might not.
Yeah. Tony Percy, my issue with the jellyfish is how it moves relative to the camera. It doesn't seem to be tracking, just being pulled along in the wake, and a cleaner copy would be useful. Ashling again recorded off a screen through a sheet of glass with that splurge. Explains the rigidity. And do you mention they didn't try to zoom? Why they didn't try to zoom in while videoing?
I think they did. I think they were zoomed in pretty much because what they were trying to do is get the other stuff around it relative. But it's easier said after the fact, isn't it? On the footage that
well, I know, but it had been in date. Maybe
you're right there, Steve.
But it had been.
You're right, Steve.
Some of these idiots are just.
That's right. I'll mute him before he says anything silly.
That's a good idea.
And then I'll sack him.
You should have done that to me 20 minutes ago.
I'll sack him as my co-host on the podcast.
The crosshairs on the camera is fixed. However, the object moves independently, so it doesn't appear to be a smudge on the lens. Fair play.
Yeah, what's really interesting, because there's two bits of footage. I only put one out. On the different terminals, so the different users on different terminals have different coloured crosshairs, so they know which user was zooming in on stuff. So that's quite interesting to know.
Yeah. Well, a good point about Brian James is the Iraqi jellyfish is at night might explain why the people didn't notice it.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah.
Darren Hudson, interesting to see what further information on these UAPs may or may not emerge from the next US Senate hearing. The more recent witness testimony, a lot of which went into the skip, and under which president? So Biden or Trump? Well, yeah, because Carter came in, because Carter had a UFO experience, didn't he? He came in claiming he was going to open it up. Clinton did, Obama did, all of them have said, oh yeah, we're going to really do this, and then suddenly.
And then they get blocked. Yeah, I mean, apparently Carter was told he didn't have the
clearance.
Didn't have the clearance for it, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. And the thing is, if we look at you haven't got the clearance, does that mean that it's an industrial secret rather than a government-owned one? Potentially.
Well, yeah. Can I come in on Jimmy Carter's experience? That's an interesting one because it probably would have just been it would have gone down as a genuine UFO, but for the fact that he became president. and he almost certainly saw, oh God, was it Mercury? He saw a planet anyway. Because the circumstances of that case, if I get this wrong, one of you jump in and tell me, but the circumstances of the case were he was doing a speaking engagement. The janitor was late to open the hall, and a bunch of people outside waiting for it spotted something strange in the sky, and they all agreed that this light was moving and couldn't possibly be like anything astronomical because of the way it was dancing. And that just went down. It was sort of locally reported, and like any other of those cases, it just sort of got filed and forgotten. And then he opened up the files as president, but he spoke openly about his own sighting. And long story short, when it was reinvestigated from people took more interest in the meteorology and the astronomy at the time, and he was almost certainly watching a planet under quite unusual atmospheric circumstances in terms of the heat haze and everything. And you add that to there are all sorts of terms like small group panic and stuff that are used, which are not widely agreed on, but basically a bunch of people winding each other up and all agreeing they're seeing something more remarkable than they did. The giveaway is that none of the group looking at the UFO saw two lights in the sky in the same place, and there was definitely a planet where they were looking.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's fascinating stuff, but you're right. As soon as it gets to sort of, we'll do this, we'll do that, suddenly. But you're right. If there's an explanation, then they're going to go, oh, fair enough. Then I saw that.
Yeah,
you're not going to go, oh, well, sorry, it was Venus, because then it's just going to compound it, isn't it? You know what I mean?
It doesn't rubbish. It doesn't rubbish presidents a lot, because there is a lot of stuff. And Carter, like any other president who had a motivation to do it, wanted to release some of this information. And allegedly, even Bill Clinton that was one of the first things he got to work on, wasn't it? In fact, it's in the Garrett Graff book, the recent book that came out. There's a lot about Clinton's dealings with UFO secrets, but Carter had an extraordinary sighting of something very ordinary.
Yeah, which 90% of them tend to be when you dig down. Of course, hey ho, he's a human being. Probably the last human president they had. Anyway, right. Liz Barkley has linked to the Astonishing Legends episode that Paul mentioned. So that's
brilliant,
podcast.
Liz, thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. Kurt, the crosshairs on the camera. Oh yeah, we've already talked about that one. Just scrolling through. Lots and lots of thanks. Very, very much appreciated. Let's have a look. That's a great one. Shared Robert more of the conversation we shared. Yeah. That's from the Neil. Yeah, CJ may have been abducted by his landlady, forcing him to clean the place. Well, that's certainly a possibility. Are there groups who meet and study night sky as groups? Yeah, there's quite a few observer ones, aren't there? There's quite a lot online, certainly. Astronomy clubs have regular observing nights. Funnily enough, there's a wolf moon tonight. I have got my own astronomical telescope, and there is thick cloud at a level about 100 feet onwards here. So I know it's a bugger. I'll be out there otherwise. Let's have a look. I think that's largely it. But hang on, Liz saying, oh, Stu, what a joy you are. Well done for standing in. Well, I'll take that one. That's a good place to end, isn't it?
Much appreciated, Stu. Yeah.
All right.